So, are you ready, sir? Can we start?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes. A cheerful good afternoon to all. I, Alfred from 3rd BCom Honors, will be the MC for the day. I welcome you all to the third day of Budget Conclave. Finally, the Union Budget for the financial year 2023 has been officially published today by our Finance Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman. So, before we get into today's session, let's have a short, crisp understanding about budget in simple terms. So, budget is basically an estimation or prediction of revenue and expenditure of the central government for a financial year. It is a financial statement laid before the Houses of the Parliament that consists of all the planned allocations of fund for various sectors. Now, that is what budget means in simple terms. I would love to thank our director, Reverend Brother Anthony Violil, our deputy director, Reverend Brother Peter, and our beloved principal, Dr. R.N. Subbarao. I would love to extend my gratitude on behalf of all students to our visionary professor, Mr. Jasmine Raj, HOD of Commerce Department, and to all the faculty members for organizing such an informative event for us. I take immense pride in welcoming Mr. Hari Babu, speaker for the day. Mr. Hari Babu is an avid person having over 12 years of experience in leading supply chain analytics and business planning in consumer, electronics, and in healthcare sectors. It includes leading transformation teams in India as well as in regional roles in Singapore and Dubai. His expertise spreads across analytics, E2E supply chains, strategic planning, and operational research. He holds a bachelor degree from PSG College and an MBA from SP Jain College. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thanks, Alfred. A very warm good afternoon to the students and to the faculty members. It's been a privilege to be part of this conclave. I think if you look at if you listen carefully to the Alfred's opening statement, he carefully explained what is the budget in simplest terms. Yes, so the budget 2023 is all out. Nirmala Sitharaman presented it at 11 a.m. and it's still live. So most of the numbers you see on the screen or the news numbers are still will be out in a couple of hours. The fine print will be out by end of the day. So at the outset, I'll just give you the highlights of the budget, and then we can go into details. So let's go back to the basic statement of basic explanation of a budget. So budget is nothing but the annual statement, which Alfred also pointed out. It's you're comparing your expenses against your revenue. So what is revenue for the government of India, and what is the expense for the government of India? So there can be multiple expenditures, right? So if you look at the expenditures for the government, it can start from uh, so a lot of sector schemes. If you see, the government supports a lot of schemes like Manrega scheme, Awas Yojana, that's housing for all, etc. So for those schemes, the government should spend money on that. So only if government spends money on those schemes, there'll be some upliftment in the society. Then you also have the defense budget. So every year, government needs to spend money on the defenses. So that's also very important for the country. Then you also have the subsidies, so which is very crucial for the country because even today, uh, if you look at below poverty line, during COVID, 80% of the population was covered with these food subsidies. You also have the pensions and the salaries for the central government employees. So also all this comes under the expense head for the government. So in a year, the government spends on several heads and a few of that which I've mentioned now. And when it comes to revenue, so the revenue can be in different ways. So one is on the corporation tax. So the corporates, when they set up a shop in India, they need to pay a tax to the government. So that is one of your avenues for the income. The other one is the personal and the personal income tax. It can be direct or indirect. GST is also a form of a tax. Customs, union, excise tax, and also others. Now, if you look at for this year alone, the government is estimating that by end of March 2023, the growth rate for the country will be around 7%. I don't think it will touch exactly at 7%. It will be around 6 to 7% by end of March 2023. Now, how did we achieve this growth of 7%? It can be based on the budget they presented last year. Now, sorry. So yeah, I was talking about the growth rate. So we will end 7% by end of March 2023. So, but the budget which the government of India is presenting today is for the next financial year, which is FY24, which starts from April 2023 and goes up to March 2024. So whatever budget announcement is only applicable for financial year 2024. So which is from April 2023 to March 2024. So that's how the budget is presented, and this is also one of the last budgets for this government, because you will also have a elections next year. So this will be the last full year budget. So again, next year in Feb 2024, you will have a budget, but then by March, by a May, you will have elections. So the budget will be applicable only for those 2 months, and after the elections, the whichever government comes into play, they will present the new budget for that term. So this budget is very key because it is for the complete year from April to March for next year, and then it also it will also it will also be the a doorway. It also opens the door for the new government. So to also see what will be the prospect for the new government, if this government will continue to be part of the next term or not. So most of first, be it the common man or corporation, corporates, or even the farmers, they're eagerly looking up to this budget. This is very key for this year. This is again a full year budget. Now, so the early numbers, if I see the Sensex is it it was green till 1 p.m., but now it is falling again. Maybe uh, uh, the the share market is not showing the thumbs up yet, because it went up to 2% in by 1 p.m., but now it is falling again. Maybe the initial trends say that it does not met the expectations for the share market. So that is at the outset. Now let's go with this whole concept of budget. Now, if you see the again, I'll go back to that slide which is presented. Oh, yeah. So if you see here, the growth is estimated at 7%. Now, what will be the growth for FY 2024? We cannot say 7%. The forecast from various economists and from various consulting agencies pegs at 6 to 6.5%, which means the FY 2024 our growth will reduce. It will not increase. They're estimating it to reduce because of macroeconomic conditions. So be it in Ukraine war, or even even if you look at other countries, most of the countries are at the verge of default or already defaulted. So even our neighbors like Sri Lanka, they've already defaulted. Pakistan is on the brink of default. So FY 2024 will also be challenging because you cannot expect the growth rate to increase, or it will fall. The overall GDP of the country currently is at 3.5 trillion US dollars. Now, how big is this GDP? So we are in top four. We were top seven few years back, but now we are in top four. So that's a good improvement for the country as well. So if the GDP improves, then there are a lot of avenues for the government of India to explore. Now, how do you translate this GDP into the budget? Right. So GDP plays a key role in the budget as well. Now, I mentioned something called a fiscal deficit target for financial year 2024 is at 5.9%. So, what do you mean by fiscal deficit here? So, fiscal deficit is is shortfall of income. So now the government income is, so I'll give you an example. The government income will be somewhere around 100, but the expenses will be 150. So 100 rupees, but then expenses is 150 rupees. So you have a deficit of 50 rupees. Now, how do you bridge this 50 rupees? So you end up borrowing money from other institutions like World Bank or IMF or Asia Development Bank. You end up borrowing money from others. So that's how you can bridge the gap between your revenues and your expenses. Your fiscal deficit is the delta between your revenue and expenses. It's usually set against your GDP of the country. So here, the government has set rate of 5.9% of your GDP. So which means they still have a buffer. If you look at, if you historical deficit is for when the COVID was at its peak, like financial year 2020, the fiscal deficit was around 9 to 10%. So why did we achieve? Why was the deficit so high during the COVID? Because we didn't have the government was not able to get the income generated. There was a lockdown. Most of us were not earning that time. The unorganized sector was largely at home. They were not earning money, so the government was not getting anything in form of tax. So your your expenses increased, but your revenue reduced. So which means you'll end up having a deficit. Time it was at its peak, like 10%, 9 to 10%. Then the next financial year, it was brought down to 7%. Now, for this current year, they, the expectation is the fiscal deficit target will be around 6 to 6.5%. But then for next financial year, the government has set the target of 5.9%. Overall, how do we compare against other countries? We are in much better shape. Why I say that? If you look at the deficit target for USA, UK, even China, for example, right? China deficit target is at close to deficit for this year alone. It is at 11% of its GDP. So that's why if you see a lot of noise happening around China as well. USA is also in uh, it's in two digits, somewhere 12 to 13%. UK as a high deficit again. So everything is affected by the COVID. Now we also have the macroeconomic Ukraine war and the and uncertain economy, right? So that's the reason why keeping your deficit in in line with with the GDP is very important to manage your overall economy. Uh, so Alfred, should I stop for any questions or should I continue now?
Sir, we can continue now. Questions will be asked later.
Okay, yeah. So, I briefly touched about the fiscal deficit. There's something called revenue deficit as well. So revenue deficit is also another way of measuring your revenues, right? So I'll again take an example. For financial year 2024, the government uh, from from April 2024 to April 2023 to March 2024, the government is expected to get revenues of close to 100 rupees. So this 100 rupees will be in form of various taxes. You pay tax to the government, so that is the revenue for them. So you pay. The government is expecting that they will get close to 100 rupees for the end of end of March 2024. But if the actual revenue is less than the projected revenue, then you get the revenue deficit. So here we're not comparing against the expenses. We are just comparing the revenue. What is the actual revenue and what is the expected revenue? And again, this year the revenue deficit is also in it's in high single digits. So I don't have the exact number, but I can pull up the numbers So that is also very important to maintain the revenue deficit for the financial year, be it for last year or this year, so that the government will get the pulse of the overall situation. So if we are able to get the enough money to meet the expenses or not. So if they're not able to meet up the revenue, then government ends up borrowing money from the institutions. So in that case, you need to pay the interest to the institutions. So that's also one of the form of expenses for the government. So instead of spending the money on the infrastructure, the government will spend money on the interest payments. So that is not a good sign, right? Uh, so that's why government will limit the borrowing and ensure that they mop up enough revenue to meet all the expenses. Now, why should the government spend on expenses? Sorry, why should the government spend on infrastructure? So, infrastructure is very critical for the growth of the country. Now, the current GDP of the country is around $3.5 trillion. So, if we need to achieve $5 trillion, which is the target for 2021, and which we couldn't meet because of several reasons, COVID is one of the primary reasons. Then the government has pushed a target of 5 trillion to 2025 and 2026. To achieve 5 trillion economy, the government has to mop up the infrastructure. So the infrastructure can be a roadways, improving the airports, improving the encouraging the manufacturing companies to set up shop in India, so, so that so, so the government can collect taxes from these organizations, and also it will provide employment opportunities to the citizens. So that's the reason why the infrastructure is very critical for the to reach the 5 trillion target. So, and if you see for this year financial 2024, the capital expenditure, so that is the that is proposed to be at 10 lakh crore, which is close to 33% higher than the last year. So this year, the government will be focusing on, as per the budget, if I see at outset, the government will be focusing on infra. They'll be focusing on financial sector. They'll be focusing on inclusive development, reaching last mile. So these are the priorities for the government on the left side, which I've mentioned it here. These are the priorities for the government for this financial year. So as I said, infrastructure is very critical for the growth of the economy. The target is to reach 5 trillion by end of 2025. So the government will ensure that it will spend enough money on the infrastructure so that it will boost the economy. Now, subsidy is also very important. So at one end, if you have expenses, the another expense will be on the subsidy. Now, if you look at if you go back 2 years during COVID, we had the government was able to cover food subsidy to 80% of the population, and they're continuing for last 2 years. And how do they do that? So, which means whatever income they get, they allocate certain percentage of the income for the food subsidies. So now this year, they're allocating close to 1.97 lakh crore. The next one is on the fertilizer. So FY 2024 fertilizer subsidy is seen at 1.75 lakh crore. And why this is important? Because uh, if you look at our agriculture, right? Agriculture is the backbone of our economy. So 40 to 50% are still dependent on agriculture. And if you do, um, and most of the fertilizers are imported into the country. So if you import the money, there'll be a lot of expenses for the government. So, but the farmers will not pay the actual cost. They get the subsidy from the government. So if for urea, they get the subsidy for if the urea is close to 1,300 or 1,400, the farmers will eventually pay 600 to 700. They get the subsidy of at least 40 to 50% of the total urea. So that is very important for the farmers. So because once you have the fertilizers, you will increase the yield. The moment you increase the yield, your agriculture output will be high. And once you have agriculture output, you can export it. So once you export it, you can your current account deficit will be in control. So we are mainly an agricultural economy. So if your exports are high and imports are less, then that's also good for the economy, because you're not paying back money to the money will still stay inside the country. very good example is China, right? So China is China is not dependent on imports, so they have self-sufficient in most ways, and they do a lot of exports. Almost A to from aeroplane to needle, everything is manufactured in China, and they export it to various parts of the world, and that is the backbone of their country. So if you look at the current account deficit of China, it's a bright star for China. Now look at Sri Lanka. What's happening? Sri Lanka was heavily dependent on tourism. And now what happened to Sri Lanka? So they're defaulted. That because of COVID, the tourism was not tourism one of the sectors which was badly affected. So most of the economy collapsed, and they are not able to pay to the other countries. So they import oil. So to import oil, you need to pay in dollars to Middle East or even for USA. And if you don't have